lang.
Lagay mo lang sa gilid.
Am I blocking the camera? Ganyan. Oh, good na. Tapos, sakto na siguro. Yan ang mahirap sa ano eh. Hindi, actually, okay lang yan. I'll just move it na lang. This will be our rotating drum. Okay, pwede na yan. si Walden. Well then, that was part of the deal. Okay, go na tayo. Set up na tayo, RJ.
Alright.
Tahimik na yung guest natin kasi takot na sila magsalita. Wala na tayo. Wait, ano yung talking points natin ulit? Wait, okay, good na. Good. Go.
Sir, picture ko sa i-reset ko lang yung record.
Oo nga, baka makakala tayo dyan. Make sure, pati silang dalawa, mahirap na wala tayo.
Ayan. Sige, para
Okay. 1, 2, 3, sound check, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, sound check, 1, 2, 3. Actually, the purpose also of this, Walden, is just in case we have a mess up in the volume or something, we have a backup second grade. So, 3 options natin. That's why I have always live for a backup. Yes. 3 cameras na tayo, talagang para sa bayan na to.
Okay, rolling.
Okay, go.
Yes.
Alright, welcome back everyone. Katulad ng pinangako natin, magkakaroon tayo ng Volume 2 ng Marcos and Marxism or Marxism and Marcos. And today, I think masyado tayong mabait last time. So today, I'm medyo nakatayo ako dito just in case. At may mga relaxan tayo for our guests just in case. Although, halal ako. So of course, we're joined by Secretary Ronald Llamas, aka ex-secretary, aka Pandit. Hindi daw siya totoong political analyst. Pero, exactly. At kasama naman natin yung totoong naging tenured professor. Pero praxis din kasi aktivista. At maraming nasulat yung Google Scholar po niya in tens of thousands po yung citation. At of course, kasama niya as usual yung pretentious vlogger na mga 5 libro lang naman sinulat ng 20s. Na hindi tenured.
Pero linawin natin, hindi tenured.
Hindi tenured, unfortunately. Kaya.
I would say your books have been quite influential.
Thank you, Walden. They're two coming, so don't forget to recommend them. I'm just kidding. No, but
I used it in my classes in New York.
thank you so much, Walden. I really appreciate it.
So, alam natutunan ng mga estudyante.
Anong mga attack nila?
Well, they wanted Rao to meet him in person.
Oh, yan. Okay.
So,
Legendary ba?
Okay.
at mukha, especially for
Walden, you wanna be careful.
Baka ma-frustrate
Baka
sila.
mapunta tayo kung saan.
Baka ma-frustrate sila pag na-meet nila.
Kinakabahan ako dyan sa mga sagot ni Sir Walden.
Huwag mo masyadong
RJ, check mo nga baka parang na-off yata yung laptop ko dyan.
Huwag mo masyadong taasan yung expectations.
So, mag-start na tayo.
Akala ko nag-start na tayo.
Start na tayo kasi nag-off yun. Hindi ko alam bakit. Ayan, okay, back. Okay,
I also want to say that Ronald is really one of the foremost political analysts.
of course, yeah.
So I don't know who's...
No, okay, let's be honest. I think we should talk about this
Is
a bit.
somebody saying that he's not a political
No,
analyst?
ang think ko kasi is, Walden, I think before, of course, today, just to signpost, we want to talk about the legacy of Congressman Edsel Lagman. Of course, nakikiramay po tayo sa kanyang pamilya. So last time we had with Dodong Nimenzo. We'll do some serious discussion.
Oh, yeah.
We'll talk about EDCA, yung legacy ng admin niya, natitirahin natin ngayon. Kasi ako malasado, so babago na naman ako ng position. And then we're gonna have some a bit serious discussion about can the opposition unite? Like, what is the degree of unity we can talk about? But before that, dahil toxic masculinity yung off-the-record discussion natin ngayon, I think we have also this kind of a toxic careerism, if I can call it like that. Like this idea of credentialism, I would call it.
Oh,
Toxic
okay.
credentialism. Di ba?
Okay.
Parang sa Pilipinas, walang makita na pati architect at engineer ilalagay nila yung... parang architect, why would you put that title?
Yeah.
Parang German is the only other country I know na ilalagay lahat ng title. Doctor, professor, ganyan.
Bakit naman, I was proud na ako lang yung cabinet secretary sa cabinet ni Pinay
Yeah.
na drop out.
Like,
What's bad about that?
organic intellectual kasi sa Sir Ronald.
Sabi nga ni Gary Granada sa kanyang kanta, diba? Pamantasan ng puso.
Yan. Ikaw organic intellectual. Organic intellectual.
What does that mean?
Ibig sabihin, magaling ka mag-organize. Yun actually in Italian language. Organic, organized, they can go together. So when Gramsci said organic intellectual, he also meant intellectuals who can organize social forces.
Ang problema, namatay si Gramsci very lonely sa loob ng Christmas.
Sir Ronald,
I don't want.
I'm giving you a 10 Paul. You know, like,
Parang ayoko
I'm
namang,
saving you.
ayoko namang mamatay sa kalungkutan inside the jail, di ba?
Pero tama yung sinabi, masyadong maraming
Credentialist, yeah.
emphasis sa credentials dito sa society natin. And I think na it should really be the ideas that count rather than degrees. So,
But Walden, I want to ask you a question. Of course, I know I've still disappointed you for not doing my PhD in Princeton, but we'll fix that with an Oxbridge degree soon. No, but ako lang naman kasi Walden is let's be honest. Your heads and above everyone else in terms of like scholarly impact international. And I'm not saying this to impress you, and it's not because you're a genius per se, although some would say you're a genius. It's because parang feeling ko, ang baba ng culture ng publications natin and all, di ba? What do you think is the problem? Why are we not a writing and reading country? As Ambet Ocampo, my colleague at Philippine Daily Inquirer, said, our national hero is Rizal and barely anyone reads Rizal. To be honest, I mean, like, did people read yung latest Penguin Books version? Very few people.
Or like our common friend, Dodong Limenso, former UP president. Wala siyang naisulat na libro.
Right.
Until namamatay siya.
And yet,
May compilation ng mga short
Anthologies.
writings niya na ginagawa o nilalaunch yata sa February 8. No? Pero yung talagang libro, katulad ng mga tenured academicians.
or hindi mo tenured, medyo ano.
hindi rin siya nakasulat. Isang kwan.
Even Randy, di ba? Did Randy David write an academic book? Parang wala. I mean, I saw his anthologies na fantastic.
Sa compilation.
but both Dodong naman and Randy, are very
Prolific,
prolific in
Yeah,
terms of their writings. No? Kasi, and they are engaged people.
They're very engaged,
So we shouldn't measure people by books, but rather by their interventions. And I think people like Randy and Dodong, I think it's their ideas and their political interventions. But I think
Pero hindi naman sila yung nagka-question ng credentials namin. Ang nagka-question ng credentials, yung mga nagpi-feeling na napakataas na academic, tapos wala pang 500 Google citation, wala pang... You know what I'm saying? Like, it's the mediocre ones.
Sabi nga nung...
It's the mediocre ones are like that.
Sabi nga nung isang common friend natin, Walden, no? Ang isang ideya na hindi nakasulat ay hindi isang ideya.
Saan siya? Hanash lang siya. Magtanggal na nga ako, medyo mahilig na ang usapan.
Hindi ko napapagitin kung sino siya, pero...
No, but Walden, okay, first of all, yes, your intellectual legacy is not defined by what you write. Our problem is people who use certain credentials to kind of try to downplay the intellectual contributions and impact of those people who are every day doing their job. Like Ronald, every single day, kahit nasa anong sulok naman, he's doing 4 or 5 analyses, he's basically putting his health on the line, right? And then in your case, my goodness, you work so hard and a lot of your books are parang strictly speaking, parang interstices of activism and also intellectual academic work, right? So parang, hindi ko maintindihan what's going on here. Like, is it a gatekeeping thing? Is it an insecurity thing? Because a lot of these critics so far is actually, sorry, but they're not relevant. Like, no one cares about them. They don't have Google citation na mataas. They don't have any social media output. They're not being interviewed. They have no policy impact whatsoever. And then, ibabash nila yung mga katulad namin or at least making some little effort, etc. Okay, magpalamig na ako. So, you get what I'm saying? I'm just being honest about it. Sobrang toxic. Mediocre na nga kayo. Toxic pa kayo.
Haba nung premise mo, para sa banatang sila, para pang nila, pang PhD.
Then, dissertation na.
well,
Dave na tayo.
anyway, we can move ahead. But I think part of it is insecurity. But so that's my sense. Is there's an insecurity there.
Yeah.
But I think the important thing is to understand that and not too much pay not too much attention to it.
Pero affected ka ba? Paano? Ako kasi I enjoy being a heckler.
Hindi.
Making fun of people in power.
My problem, Ronald, is actually...
Wala akong pretension na maging intellectual. So,
No, my problem kasi, Ronald, is, thank God in my own case, I build my own thing, right? So but I'm worried about the younger generation scholars. Like for instance, the other day I saw like some of the young graduates of certain place, parang binabash ako online, and I was like, what? I don't even know this kid. So ang gets ko is, feeling ko, yung mga iba, parang don't be a Haydarian. Parang ganon yung tinuturo sa mga next. Parang medyo toxic na yan, di ba? Instead of encouraging, be a better version of Haydarian. Or like, do what Haydarian does and then do this and that. Sabi ko, parang napaka-toxic na yan. This is not good. This is not
That will
good.
be constant eh. There will be a lot of people
No,
attacking and praising
No, but
us.
Ronald, this again,
Diba?
but the other thing is, ang dami ko rin kilala, ayaw na pumasok sa academe kasi daw napaka-toxic. Ang baba nga ng bayad, medieval pa yung wars. I mean, as Kissinger said, right? Kaya he went out of our words. Sabi niya, the problem with the academic world is the stakes are so low, but the fights are so vicious. No offense. But, you know, like, maybe not in US. You taught in US, Walden. Maybe it's slightly better there. I don't know.
Pero di ba okay yun? What doesn't destroy you will strengthen you intellectually.
I'm not sure I'm gonna be Nietzsche on this. Medyo ibang intellectual. I have a different philosopher.
Hindi, sabi nga ng lolo ko, yung puno ng mangga, pag namumunga, binabato talaga yan.
Yeah.
So, pag walang bumabato sa'yo, doon ka kabahan.
Yeah. No, but then again, Ronald, as I said, me, I thrive on disruption and bashing and all because I enjoy it. But I'm worried about the next generation scholars who are getting really turned off. Low productivity na nga yung mga ibang academic circles natin. Napaka-toxic, napaka-credentialist. Tapos they bash pa the few people are trying to do it. So like, in short, Walden, how can we encourage a new generation of scholars to be better version of me or to continue what you're doing? Ganun na lang messaging. Okay, okay ka na, Sir Ronald?
Pwede.
Okay. At hindi maging Ronald Llamas.
Sorry, Nietzsche ko eh.
Sorry. Ganun na lang, Walden.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I mean, I fully agree that let's not bash people because of credentials. If we must bash them, we must bash them for their politics.
Or their stupidity.
Right. Or if you're gonna bash...
Like, for instance, all those that people that going on to our friend, the late Edsel Lagman. We had a very difficult fight in
I remember those days,
in
yeah.
Congress because
Yeah.
The bishops and basically the so-called intellectuals of the church were really up against us all the way. And so that's why, coming back to your issue, the important thing is what people say rather than credentials.
And intentions, good intentions. Sincerity matters. Right? Can we talk about Edsel Lagman? I want to get your point of view because the last time we did essentially a memoriam to Dodong Numenso, which I think made people even more curious about a lot of folks that we have to know more about. And sana hindi lang yung hintayin pa natin for them to pass on. There's still a lot among us great people like Randy David probably we want to talk about too.
Yeah.
But going back to Edsel Lagman, can you first explain to people yung context ng debate niyo, the Orange Peel, and what you feel are your frustrations with the Catholic Church back in the day? Kasi ngayon, the Catholic Church, because of, they feel they're being, sidelined politically, they see the rise of other groups na Dutertismo and do I need to name this? So there's a sense that they have to re-engage the public, and they're reaching out. So I was in Bicol just the other month, and we met folks from parishes, the bishop, among others. Genuine talaga, they're asking, what should we do in order to be able to help good governance? But what you're telling us, Walden, is that back in the day when you were in Congress, you had not very encouraging experiences when it comes to them. And I remember during the RH bill, you would see people in church attacking Risa Ontiveros.
Yes.
Parang team Buhay versus team ganon. So,
Patay.
exactly. Like, I remember those days, and then I'm seeing what I'm saying now. My take is more optimistic. Maybe there's an evolution. Maybe we should ask our resident Catholic Affairs analyst soon, live from Vatican. But ikaw, Walden, can you tell us, honestly, what was the context of those debates in Irish Bill? And where did Edsel Lagman get your respect? Because you had a recent article in tribute to Edsel.
Yeah.
Can you lay it out for people, please?
Well, talagang bilib ako kay Edsel kasi I was able to work with him in 3 congresses on several major bills. One
Yeah.
was the extension of agrarian reform. law that, of course, Edsel was heading that up, but Risa, when she was in Congress, was also one of the main sponsors of the bill. The Marcos Victims Compensation Bill.
Right.
This was in the 16th Congress that provided compensation from the seized Swiss accounts of Marcos. And Edsel played a very important role in that. But the most important one, ang sabi ko nga, was the
Right.
Reproductive Health Bill.
RH bill, yeah.
The RH bill. And,
Can you, again, sorry, for people who are not familiar, because this is like 12 years ago, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So what was the RH bill? Was it the population control bill? Because the church and some of the critics tried to portray it in a certain... What are the facts of the case? What was the RH bill fundamentally about? Before I go to our resident.
Kaya tinawag siya na Team Buhay at saka Team
Exactly.
Patay.
So can you clear the air, Walden? What was the RH bill all about? How did it come
The
together?
RH bill was basically about women controlling their bodies. That was what it was.
So autonomy,
about.
sovereignty over
Autonomy.
it. Yeah.
It's a human
And-
rights issue.
It's a human rights issue, and of course, it was the right of couples to do family planning.
Right.
So this was, in other countries, this is not even controversial. Indonesia and Thailand and Vietnam, all of those countries now ahead of us, saw that it was important to do some family planning in order to be able to develop.
Even
the
Iran,
countries.
Islamic
Yeah.
Republic of Iran, they have very strong. Yeah.
Aside from their divorce laws.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And then, but here, we couldn't even get to first base for a long time.
Yeah.
It was bottled up in the Committee on Population because of the church lobby. But, Edsel would dutifully introduce it at the beginning of every Congress, but it was only in 2011 that we were able to make the breakthrough. So it was since 1999.
Protracted talaga.
Protracted talaga, about 14 years before it was finally passed. And it was what really got me disappointed with the bishops was all of the really terrible arguments, which were false information, false news that they were bringing about. Like, for instance, there are people in Congress who speak about using condoms would help spread AIDS.
Yeah, I
You know?
remember that discussion.
And,
Yeah.
It was called an abortion bill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you encourage parang teenage pregnancy. May mga ganun-ganun din.
Yeah.
Immorality,
Yeah.
mga ganun. Yeah.
And that it was using a condom will be the first step on the slippery slope to abortion.
Yeah.
No, which was crazy, disconnected ideas.
Right.
But and then the church really defended these antiquated ideas.
Right.
And they tried to intimidate us. They showed up a few days before the second reading vote, which was this decisive vote. They were all in red robes with their Suketo-style caps. And out of, basically the message was that, those who vote for the RH bill
Are
going
voting
to
for all
suffer.
these evil, yeah.
They're going to suffer politically, and they were, this was the message of that show of force of all the bishops coming in. But the important thing is the Congress of the Philippines, the representatives of the Filipino people, the majority of them, did not allow themselves to be intimidated by the antiquated ideas of the bishops,
Right.
and voted after 14 long years to pass the RH bill. And I was disappointed kasi, Ronald, that even
Right.
some of our allies ng mga who are great on social justice issues,
Nag-hesitate.
yeah, well, they would even tell us, we support you, but we cannot speak out. And we said, oh my God, ano ba ito? Is this the bowing to Stalinist methods from the Vatican?
Command from the top, yeah.
So it was that sort of,
Yeah.
that battle really totally turned me off to the Catholic hierarchy.
Ronald, can I transition to you? Because my take is, I'm not questioning the facts of your argument. Ang tanong ko is that, isn't that a snapshot that may not capture the evolution of the church? Kasi this is still a transition from the Ratzinger to the Pope Francis one. Because if you look at Pope Francis by mid-2010s, his positioning on LGBT issue, even on diverse issue, medyo parang, I won't say progressive, but a little bit less traditional, if I can put it. And some people would even argue, I mean, people in US, like the MAGA people are calling him a communist pope, even, right? So I think it would be unfair to say that the Catholic Church has not also evolved since then. And some would say, well, then again, you can disagree with me. Some would say that, in fact, the defeat in RHP and subsequent inability of the Catholic Church to shape the moral conversation during elections 2016 may have awakened them to the need to recalibrate. Now, ibang usapan if they have been awakened enough. But, Sir Ronald, am I being overly generous here? Because you know more than me. You deal with bishops. You were recently in Vatican also for the elevation of some of our good friends to
Not to defend the church.
Yeah, this is not apologia.
Because
This
the
is
church
just-
is dalawa yan eh.
Right.
The institutional church and the church.
Right.
It's a 2,000-year-old institution.
Right.
Uh,
The oldest of
yeah,
its kind, yeah.
Yeah, it survived dahil nga at particular moments they were able to rise above the tensions, the divisions within the institution. No? Pero at present, it's grappling with the pre-modernity, with modernity, and post-modernity. No? Kaya their position is not very envious. No? At being an institution with almost 2 billion members, you can imagine
and growing.
You can imagine the composition, the factions within. You have progressives, you have conservatives who wants to bring back the Latin Mass, etc. You have popes being killed in the Middle Ages, the Borgia popes, etc. And yet they survived that. Lately, you have a pope dying, which yung iba ang sinasabi, under mysterious circumstances. Si Pope John Paul I, na very open dito sa reproductive health, very open sa maraming mga issues na hindi traditionally accepted ng mainstream church. Kaya ang tingin ko ay for now, ang tawag nila kay Pope Francis, at least si Vice President Vance at si Trump, as the Antichrist.
Or a communist.
Or a communist.
Yeah.
Talagang threaten sila doon sa
Yeah.
kaunting mga reforms na gusto niya gawin. This is not to overhaul the church. Mga kaunting reforms yan eh. Kaya nga, nung diniconstruct ko yung kanyang sermon, nung nandun ako last month, ang daming hugot lines. Na pwede mo sabihin na self-criticism niya about the church. No? Yung sinabi niya na Christ was going uphill sa Calgary while his apostles are going down. From my vantage point, parang criticism yan sa mga institutional leaders ng church. Yung sinabi niya na inconsistencies and contradictions of the human heart. Parang naririnig ko si Morris West eh.
Yeah.
Nung sinulat niya yung Shoes of the Fisherman, na sabi ni Morris West, why did a perfect God chose such an imperfect institution to
carry the message,
carry his message to the world? So, yun yung contradiction ng institutional church. No? At marami po siyang sinabi na tingin ko ay self-criticism. We have lost sight of essences. We are preoccupied with trivialities. Parang it's a criticism of the bureaucracy of the institution of the church. No? We have stopped walking, and the church is about walking. It's not about standing still. No? Ayun, clearly, malinaw sa akin kung ano yung self-criticism.
Should go with the times.
Tapos yung
and,
kanyang conclusion was about inclusivity. No? While others are pushing for exclusivity. Ito yung first non-European Pope, di ba? At siya ay being attacked from all sides, not only outside the church, but even inside the church. So itong mga sinasabi niya na hindi naman niya directly in-articulate, no? Ay tingin ko is a real criticism, self-criticism nung institutional church na pinamumunuan niya. At tingin ko, dahil mahina na siya, matanda na, is soon to retire, ay yung possible successor na pinipili niya will be in the middle of all these battles, all these contradictions, all these, tawag niya, inconsistencies of the human heart.
Can you say that the church is in a transition phase, if I can put it that way? No.
Yes, but there's a post-modernity in our age of social media, etc., identity issues. Ay maraming mga tao ay sinusukat yung simbahan based on a different set of rules, a different set of principles. At yan ay nakaka-threaten sa isang 2,000-year-old institutions. No? Kaya the next conclave will be a battle between these tendencies, between these mga factions, if I may call them. No? Kaya nasa isang napaka-defining moment yung simbahan. Sabi ko nga, the contradictions of pre-modernity, modernity, and post-modernity ay kinakaharap nila in such a short span of time. No? Kaya very decisive itong mga dinadaanan ngayon ng simbahan. Both the institution as well as the lay members of the church. No? Huwag mo kalimutan, almost 2 billion ang member. No?
Well, 2 billion is Christians in general, I think. That includes non-Catholics.
The Catholic is about 1.5.
1.5, but vast majority.
Yeah.
Well, then, you want to comment this kasi obviously the Marxist tradition is like the opium of the masses and all of that. But the reality is that religious groups are extremely influential, whether it's the evangelical groups in the United States or whether it's some of these non-Catholic denominations here in the Philippines who allegedly do block voting, recently had a peace rally. From a democratic progressive standpoint, what is your read of this, and where does the Catholic Church fit into that landscape comparatively?
I think that if many of these evangelical groups at this point have been intervening politically, I think a great part of the reason is that they have seen that the division between the temporal and spiritual power in the Philippines has long been
slippery.
Has long been violated by the Catholic Church. And so, in many ways, they had an example to base the fact their behavior of intervening politically. Although our Constitution says that there is a clear separation between the temporal power and the spiritual power, and nowhere was this clearer than during the battle over the RH bill, whereby the church basically came on to the arena, of the temporal power to take care of the physical welfare of the country and pushed what was basically something that was other countries were doing, which was family planning. Not controversial, and yet they stepped in and basically tried to kill this. Thank God that we had a Congress that stood up to the church. And you're definitely right that that was a defining moment for the church. That they realized, although some still haven't realized this, because you just seen that there are these 7 senators that withdrew their sponsorship of Risa Hontiveros' comprehensive sex education bill, because again the Catholic Church and the hierarchy have been trying to stop it. To stop sex education, this is something that people really need to have at a time of rising teenage pregnancy, because talaga, it's very important for the government to be able to provide the facilities to tell people this is what happens in sex, rather than people realizing, oh my God, so this is what happened to me, now I'm pregnant.
Or contracted a disease, God forbid, especially in our very hyper-sexualized digital era, right?
What could be wrong with such a bill that they would threaten to retaliate against the senators? But when I looked at the names of these people, like Jinggoy and
paragons of morality and family values,
first they say, okay, they withdraw. But I was quite disappointed that even
Sereno.
Lauren
Legarda
withdrew. Oh, okay. But kasi
Nancy Dina.
But in any case, what I'm just trying to say is that I would disagree that they've learned their lessons.
The lessons, okay.
You know?
You're
Kasi,
more skeptical, yeah.
I mean, maging neutral na lang sila. Don't start trying to kill the comprehensive sex education bill. But, you know,
Wait, you're talking about Catholic Church, but does
Lalo
Sereno
na-
represent
lalo
Catholic
na
Church?
evangelical siya.
Yeah.
Lalo na
Exactly,
the side,
yeah.
yung sinasabi nitong mga senators na ito ay based on fake news.
Mm-mm.
Based on disinformation.
Yeah, yeah.
What they just have to do is check
Yeah.
the bill.
Yeah.
No? Parang si Presidente Bongbong.
Yeah.
Woke daw itong bill. Marami daw mga detestable components.
Can I
etc.,
clarify?
etc.
Ang-
Simpleng-simple lang yun. Papasahin mo lang yung bill.
just
No? Or ipabasa mo sa sekretary mo.
Wait, Sir Ronald. Ang sabi nila dun sa bill daw, meron parang, ano yun, about masturbation for 0 to 4-year-old kids.
Yeah,
Tapos yung isang former Chief Justice said, who's not Catholic, I think
Evangelical.
sabi niya something like, baka ang mangyari dyan, people are gonna use remote control, then put condom, and then people will be traumatized by remote control. Then they're gonna touch themselves in class like, sabi nung daan to South Park pa to, like what
Well,
the heck was that?
In fairness, yung Catholic Church was not up in arms.
Yun nga,
katulad
kaya
ng
that's what I'm saying.
Katulad
Walter,
ng RH
yeah,
bill.
I felt, kasi there's
Nandito
yeah.
yung mga Jesus is Lord, nandito yung
That's what I'm saying, Walter,
evangelical.
yeah.
Sila yung medyo vanguard dito sa mga
Exactly.
Catholic. Yung church, medyo parang hesitant.
In-
No? Especially with a leader like Cardinal Ambo. No? Hindi sila masyadong katulad nung sa RH bill dati.
Yeah.
They toned down. That's what we're saying.
Sure, but
Yeah.
if you read the Inquirer and all of that, it's priests who are writing it.
Yeah,
You know.
Okay.
So it's
Opus Dei priest.
probably, but I'm just. In other words, I think that I'm quite skeptical
Skeptical pa rin yan.
about this.
Gusto ko lang banggitin dahil
Please, Ron.
nabanggit mo kanina yung opium of the people.
Yeah,
no?
yeah.
Actually, nung
Masses.
sinulat siya ni Karl Marx, meron siyang mas empathic na mga description. Ang sabi niya, the sigh of the oppressed. Yung
Right.
religion daw. The heart of a heartless world. Hindi lang siya naging popular, yung opium of the people na naging popular.
Yeah.
Pero marami siyang mas empathic na description sa religion.
Even Nietzsche, right? Even Nietzsche said it anchors society morality.
God is dead, sabi niya, di ba?
I mean, if you read Thus Was Zarathustra, he still talks about that if you take away religion, then you're left with, well, next thing you have is fascism, Nazism. But anyway, I don't want to go too much into that. Ang point ko lang is, I think people have to understand, we do have, I think, some different points of view in terms of, is the church evolving or has it evolved enough? And then the other thing is that ang dami ng ibang mga religious groups. I mean, Walden, from a political sociology, because you're the tenured sociologist among the three of us. No, but on a serious note, can you have a real democracy if religious groups who don't pay taxes, who are getting all of the advantages of not being, of having, can be so openly involved? I'm not talking about the Catholic Church per se, but you know, we had the peace rally the other month and all of that. I mean, can you really have a real democracy if you have a situation like that, whereby each organized religious group essentially tries to flex their muscle once in a while?
Well, I think
Or it's just an expression of a pluralistic democracy, to be fair?
No, I think that one of the things that I really, feel is the foundational principle of democracy is the separation of church and state. And I think that when that is threatened, then you will in fact have a situation, which could really lead to tremendous social strife.
Right.
Once religion invades the secular realm, as it is now doing in many places, including the United
The
States,
US, yeah.
then I think the possibility really of civil conflicts that become irreconcilable precisely because they begin to be seen as all or nothing conflicts that have been brought into the secular arena, then I think that is a real danger at this point. That's why, to come back to my original point,
Yep.
the lesson that many of these evangelical groups, or whatever you call them at this point, the bad lesson that the Catholic Church
Precedence,
hierarchy taught them was in fact about intervention in the political arena, and nowhere was this most evident than during the RH Bill conflict. Now, that's why, for me, that was an experience that I really made me very, very, how would you call it now, quite firm. In terms of my my attitudes towards the church. Not that I was a Catholic before.
Di ba neo ka?
Yeah. But but the important thing is what I'm just trying to say here is that very strong yung formation ko in terms of my current attitudes towards the
I
church
see.
by my experience with the RH.
Studying in
Pero meron ngayong
So-
mga very important theologians, katulad ni Thomas Halleck,
Right.
Czech theologian and priest, na malaki influensya ngayon dito sa mga debates within the
Right.
church. No? Meron siyang magandang book, The Afternoon of the Church.
Right.
Na pinapaliwanag niya yung context ng evangelization, the
Right.
centerpiece of the Catholic Church. Kasi sinasabi niya na, how can you have evangelization without enculturation? No? Evangelization is about convincing those who are unconvinced. And you
Yeah.
cannot just impose your values, your parang ideology, your theology, on those you are trying to convince. You have to understand their culture.
Right.
No? Kaya,
Life world.
Kaya
Yeah.
ang premise niya, ang kanyang proposal is inclusivity.
Right.
Which is now a major debate within the Catholic Church. No? At kung hindi natin ito gagawin, itong enculturation, ay yung ating evangelization will be just an empty shell of what evangelization means. So, and this guy, this priest, this theologian is having such a wide influence.
Following, yeah.
Especially dun sa mga non-European Catholic churches.
Right.
No? At tingin ko, even Pope Francis is listening or reading him. No? Dahil nga, the future of the church,
Is in the global south.
yes.
Ang sarap talaga pag Ateneo at USC tumabit to as taga-UP yung nagtatanong. I have two related questions on this. One is more local and one is more global. One is, and I felt this was a kind of an unorthodox interpretation. When Duterte was attacking the church, one interpretation was, he has the wrong intention, he's the wrong person, but you need assertion of the secular power by the Filipino president. Pinoy did it in a much more subtle democratic way. And I sense one of the continuities between Pinoy and Duterte was
And he
the
he was a better messenger.
is the assertion of the secular power. Give unto Caesar what is his, right? Is that an over-generous reading of Duterte? Or at the very least, wasn't that a precedence for future Filipino presidents to also draw the line? I have the democratic mandate. Let me do my job, respect the separation of church and state. Because from Pinoy to Duterte, you saw a certain degree of continuity, at least on that point. Both of them pushed back against religious intervention. I know this has not been explored as much, but I remember this was one of the interesting discussions that came out of Duterte. No? That he's kind of like the brutal Borgia kind of prince, drawing the line and saying, Florence is Florentine. The Vatican
I doubt if Duterte has any framework doon sa kanyang mga criticism or nung tinawag niyang stupid ang Diyos.
No, not that part.
Nung binura niya si Pope Francis.
But he supported the RH bill, didn't he?
That was about traffic. No, yun yung, but also, Pinoy also supported the RH bill. No? Medyo reluctant pa siya doon sa divorce bill. Pero sabi niya, isa-isa lang. No? Pero yung RH bill ay nag-flourish during his watch. No? At very religious si Pinoy,
Yes.
Unlike us. No? Very religious. Kaya, ibang-iba siya kay Digong. No? Digong is just bad. No? At doon siya nanggagaling.
But Digong pushed for divorce.
It's not about
Digong pushed for,
because he was divorcee. He was a divorcee.
yeah, but he didn't have to, again, I'm not trying, again,
Pero at the same time,
are you being
no-
unfair to Duterte that maybe he indeed had some,
no, he's just evil. No? Nung bumunggo siya sa, pinost niya yung divorce, pero at the same time,
balance mo, Walden?
biglaan siyang umatras. No? Biglaan siyang umatras. Parang pinost lang niya, tapos, okay, atras na. Di ba? So, he's the worst messenger.
False vessel, yeah.
Yeah. At hindi siya nanggagaling sa isang framework about separation.
Hindi siya
of church,
ideological.
about
Yeah.
separation of church. It was just a moment na siguro may nakabulong sa kanya at sinabi niya ganito, nung may bubulong sa kanya ng iba, atras siya.
Pero
Ikaw, Alden,
ang
ikaw.
sense ko lang
Yeah.
is that precisely because of the church's overreach doon sa our age, that allowed
Give an opening,
people
yeah.
like Digong, who, as I agree, that he had no framework except what would
At the moment.
the aggrandizement
Right.
of power, and he would use anything
Yeah.
to do that, including at the time when talagang people were quite upset with the church because it had opposed
Yeah.
the DJA, RH bill, no?
Yeah.
So my sense is, you know, that it was Digong at his most opportunistic, and I wouldn't lend any credence
Yeah.
to the fact to any claim that he was acting out of a concern for the
Secular.
secular realm. But he was, you know, if we see Digong, this was the same thing all over. You know, at first he was attacking the Americans. By the end of his term, he was basically saying, well,
Yeah.
Americans stay in the Philippines. It's great that we now have AUKUS,
Yeah.
you know, and that, you know.
So posturing. You're saying it was
Posturing.
empty posturing.
You know, definitely.
well,
I agree, and this is that one of the places that I really was happy with Pinoy was that he made a firm stand
Right.
on pushing the RH bill, and that was something, you know, that you know, I mean, the one thing where the good memory, because I opposed Pinoy in many other fronts, as Ronald
And
know.
a bit
But-
more than just opposed.
yeah. But on the RH,
Yes.
that was,
My
you
man.
know, he knew the stakes there, which was the division between the secular and the religious. That basically he was making a stand, you know, for the secular character of our democracy. So that's
So in short, you're saying you prefer the Pinoy version of reassertion of the secular realm
Yeah.
rather than the Duterte version.
yeah.
I think
because-
that's more or less what both of you guys are saying.
No, I
yeah.
mean, because the Duterte version, it was just really, it wasn't even anything that had to do
Yeah.
with defending democracy or the secular
Yeah.
realm. It was just
Power play, ego trip.
Yeah, and an ego trip, and that you know, it was promoting whatever he wanted to do at the moment. You know? So
But don't you think at some point, if this religionization of our politics reaches a certain threshold, that you may need a l'état c'est moi kind of a Sun King, strong man, or secular leader to come in and draw the line? Don't you think at some point that may be necessary? I know this is the dangerous argument I'm making, I'm implying here, but na baka the Pinoy version might be too weak at some point to make sure things are in the right place.
well, I think naman that you can have such strong enforcement of these, you know, the religious, the realm of religion and the secular realm, without it being done in a dictatorial
Yes.
way. I think that can be done.
Right.
An even more strong assertion than Pinoy would make, but not dictatorial.
Can you what is the Latin American parallel of this? Because they're Catholic countries and they have much more progressive legislations than us, including on divorce, right? I mean, even compared to our Catholic peers, we are quite unique, right?
Yes.
How did their secular authorities, or for that matter, Spain and Italy and those other Catholic countries, how did their secular authorities assert the power in face of reactionary pushback by religious groups?
Well, I think in Latin America, I think that the progressive left made a very big difference there.
Right.
Because it wasn't just the liberals
Yeah.
who were already, who were in an anti-clerical mode, but progressive parties on the left who came to power at various points in time. Over time, they were able to read into their constitutions and their politics the separation between the church and state. And over time, they were able to push, the institutionalization of family planning, divorce, abortion, and it's and for all intents and purposes, you have countries that are now much more secular than
Yeah.
say they were
A generation
a
ago.
generation
Yeah.
ago. And I think it's also following the same footsteps as in Europe,
Yeah.
whereby Italy and
Spain,
Spain,
And France,
traditional
obviously.
Catholic countries
Yeah.
have have been able to enforce this separation between the church and state, and pass divorce, abortion, and family planning laws that are basically would not have been conceivable 50 years
Yeah,
ago.
absolutely.
I mean, Spain,
Until Franco fell, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
but
inconceivable. Yeah.
Italy. I mean, these are now
Absolutely,
the
yeah.
bastions of strong secularism.
Right.
And
And yet,
and the Philippines could also follow that path, if just the religious groups, particularly the Catholic Church, were to really learn that you can't resist the expansion of human rights to be enjoyed by people, whatever
minorities,
their
women,
identity
and
so I would say that the passing of the RH bill was a very important part in terms of the step, in terms of the expansion of human rights in our country, and Edsel that we both knew.
Please, yeah.
And I was so happy to work with, because I called him my commander in Congress.
Yeah, I remember those days,
And let me just say here that as I wrote recently, I was just astonished at his debating skills.
Yes.
He was like a tank that was punching holes,
Yes.
almost single-handedly, in the defenses of the pro.
And with the Roman statesman prose too.
Yeah.
I mean, incredible.
I
Yeah.
miss that. Nagdebate sila ni Pablo
Galing,
Garcia,
Oops, sorry.
nagdebate sila ni
Yeah.
Eddie Boy Locsin, Ronnie Zamora,
Yeah.
no? Lahat sila wala na ngayon sa Congress eh.
Yeah.
No? Si Walden Bello, wala na eh.
That was a golden era,
nami-miss
no?
ko yung ganung quality ng debate.
Yeah.
No?
That's what the RH, the battle over RH was, that we had real debates.
Even if you disagree with what they're saying,
Yeah.
at least meron silang
Yeah.
intellectual rigor.
Yeah, nandun yan talaga.
At medyo tama yung grammar.
May sinasabi ka sa quad count ulit. There's another thing I want to ask in relation to this.
Hindi, gusto ko lang dagdagan yung
Please.
binanggit ni Walden tungkol kay
Yes.
Edsel.
Edsel.
Dahil
Please.
kasama namin siya noong 96, 97, 98 dun sa pag-campaign dun sa party list law.
Right.
Which was the real party list law then. Ngayon, nabago na eh. Na-distort na yan ang mga decisions sa Supreme Court. No? Hindi mo na alam ngayon what kind of party list law
Right.
tayo ngayon. Pero noong 96, 97, 98, 98 naging bata siya, ay isa sa mga stalwarts na kasama namin was Senator Bobby Tanyada, Eta Rosales, and Edsel Lacman.
Right.
At huwag niyong kalimutan, yung dalawang kapatid ni Edsel ay very progressive na namatay.
Yeah.
Dahil sa EJK, extrajudicial killings.
Martial law.
Si Attorney Hermon,
1977 yan.
1977,
martial law,
First,
during
one
martial
of the
law.
first disappearances.
Yes. Tapos si Popoy Lagman,
Yeah.
post EDSA na, namatay. So, even yung pamilya niya ay nag-sacrifice
Right.
dito sa
He has
struggle
wounds
na
to
ito.
show, yeah,
Yes.
exactly, yeah.
So, kailangan maalala ng mga tao yan.
Yes.
No? They may disagree with some of the positions ni Edsel, pero hindi mo matatawaran yung commitment ng kanyang pamilya. At hindi mo rin matatawaran yung kanyang
Yeah.
mga advocacies for political reforms.
Right.
Yeah, that's very important yan. I said nga
Please.
kay Attorney Lara Ramirez when I went to the wake last week. I said that your family has really paid a price.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that his
Sacrifice.
brother was assassinated,
Yeah.
and the other one was also gunned down. I think
Grabe, no?
right away.
Yeah.
Grabe, grabe. Yeah.
That I think these were experiences that fortified him to really fight for human rights.
And he felt he carries the burden of responsibility kasi he has to continue the legacy. I have another question, and probably we'll make even more enemies with this one. Woke ideology. What on earth really is this woke thing? Because it's now the favorite cannon fodder of the MAGA movement, illiberals, conservative factions,
Even
clerical
our
factions.
president.
And the president even using-
to attack the sex education bill.
What
It
is
was
this?
so woke.
What is this woke thing, Walden? Because of the three of us, you have seen the evolution of the left at the global level, not just in the Philippines. You were there in the Berkeley days of the '60s and all. Is woke ideology really an ideology? Is it a knockoff of progressive ideas, or is it actually an antithesis of progressive ideas? Because some people will say woke is really just a bunch of liberal people who are interested in some projects of people who essentially try to focus on issues of prejudice and discrimination, but taking out the class conflict aspect altogether. And a lot of these people are concentrated in elite institutions like top universities, NGOs, etc. What is your read of this woke? Because this is what always the right-wing MAGA use to denigrate the entire left and progressive movement. Is wokeism a reflection? Is it a digression?
No,
Is it a continuation? How do you see this woke thing?
I think this whole anti-woke thing is, really a matter of disinformation about what
They really
it-
stand for
it really stand for.
Right.
Diversity,
equity,
equality,
equity and,
and
inclusiveness.
inclusion.
Yeah.
I think these are efforts to really
Legitimately
make
take care of,
the progressive democratic ideal extend to everyone.
Right.
And in the United States, shorthand na lang dyan in order to, for instance, attack institutions or programs that want to eliminate racism. Malaki talaga yung component ng racism in this anti-woke thing.
Black Lives Matter, for instance.
Yes.
Yeah.
And even sexism.
Yeah, and sexism. So,
Sir, I think we can.
I would say that that's really, what they call wokeism or DEI is really an expansion of democratic rights. And of course, the right will never want that. The racists will never want that. The anti-women people will never want that. But then they try to just caricature it.
It's a strawman attack.
Yeah,
It's a strawman attack. Yeah.
But the problem, I think, here, and you mentioned this, the class and identity is that.
And the cancel culture. Can I also add
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
The
It's
cancel
a very
culture.
reductionist attack.
Yeah.
Reducing everything to a label, to a slogan.
Yeah, I fully agree with that.
Mm.
But I think where the problem was in the U.S. And other countries
Yeah.
is that many of the democratic progressive parties even forgot all about the class issue.
Exactly.
And they just allowed this neoliberal pro-market and everything to destroy the lives of working people.
Including white Americans.
White Americans,
Yeah,
that
exactly.
sort of thing. So they didn't pay attention
The class conflict,
to, in fact, the importance of class in the United States until they finally realized, oh my God, the workers have deserted us now. And the workers are basically saying it's because neoliberalism and all of this policies have failed. And that made them very receptive to this wokeism. So this is it's a bit more complex than just an attack against the extension of democratic
Civil rights,
values,
and civil
that
rights
sort of
movements.
thing. If in fact in Europe and the United States the Democrats and progressives had not forgotten the economic needs of the people
Exactly.
and did not allow very high levels of inequality, the 1% to be able to dominate, and you would not have had a base.
And
for
working with
this
the labor unions, grassroots movements.
Kaya nakakatuwa nung ginamit siya ni President Bongbong Marcos. Because I can imagine, most Filipinos don't know what woke what woke means.
I don't think Marcos knows what woke means.
Nakiki-alt-right lang kasi siya, kasi Trump na yung president. No, but Sir Ronan, I want to ask you on this, kasi as a victim of cancel culture, which is not so effective so far. Yeah. I mean, no, me. Parang, kaya nga, ang term natin sa Tagalog, pa-woke. Yung hindi genuinely really for inclusion and diversity. May mga tao na parang wina-weaponize ito to just cancel, ay, toxic masculinity yan. Ay, ano yan, dati, ano yan, DDS yan. Because you're not on Twitter, but I see this a lot, this cancel culture, Walden, which is not really, like, shut down na the debate. Huwag na tayo mag-debate kasi ito, ano yan, toxic masculinity yan, ganun. For me, that's pa-woke. Hindi siya woke, pa-woke. That is a bit problematic in my opinion. Di ba?
I mean, sticks and stones
Yeah.
can break my bones. But FB,
Wala
Twitter, X,
ka kasing Twitter eh.
will never hurt me.
Kaya you'll never feel what I'm feeling. It's like,
What's the question?
yeah, no, I mean, this whole cancel culture, etc. You know, like the reason is because this affected also the 2022 election to a certain degree. Like for instance, when there was an attempt to create a broader coalition with centrist forces against the unit team, right? Biglang, ay, hindi, ito pwede yan, ito dating DDS yan, ito si ganito yan, ito si ganito yan, ito si Hidara, huwag niyo pakinggan kasi dinebate niya yung mga DDS na yan, yung mga ganun. Like,
That's why we have to develop a more effective strategy. No? Dahil effective yan against progressives. No?
Yeah.
Ako hindi ko sisisihin simply yung mga atake. Sisisihin ko rin yung bakit hindi natin nadepensahan yung ating mga sarili? What was lacking? So ako, mas ang hahanapin ko ay how do we confront? Because our enemies will always be imaginative, will always adjust in their attacks against us. Dapat tayo ganun din. Mabilis din tayo mag-adjust. It's like a political war. No? Yes, damaging yan sa atin. But what did we do wrong? Or what didn't we do right? No?
Saan tayo nagkakulang?
Basta ko titignan siya. No? Yung cup half full, half empty.
Parang bait mo na, Sir Ronald.
Hindi
Parang ayaw ko maniwala.
Dahil pwede naman ako ng bardagulan. Pero bahagi
Papunta
kasi
na tayo dyan.
Bahagi kasi dyan is, what's wrong with us?
Yeah.
No? What's wrong with us? Sure.
What's wrong with us? That's a good way of putting it. Before we go and fight over ETCA and US-China thing, because I think that's where we have the most disagreement. From the same, let's say, progressive standpoint, sana, at least in my case. I want to talk about this. Is the opposition, genuine opposition, so hindi na DDS, SMNI, those people, can they ever unite or get disunited? Kasi the context of my conversation with Ronald and Res, and I wanted to get your point, is that, like, yung January 31, punta ka sa umaga, I'm with him, and like, you know, it's all like impeach Sara, 85%, let's agree on that, and then 15% BBM ba din. Then I go to the next one, it's like Martin Romualdez, worst budget ever, kasalanan mo lahat BM, and then like 10-20% impeach Sara, diba? And then makabayan have their own thing.
Pero nakalimutan ka.
Anong nakalimutan?
Ang malaking banner.
And then there was this, kasi 2 minutes na, and then there was this malaking banner, hindi ako nagbabody shame, si Martin Romualdez yung nasa gitna, and then konting Sara and Marcos, diba? So essentially it was an attack. And then there was another banner, and there you go. Parang all resign, parang resign lahat. Marcos down, ganun. And then, even more interestingly, may mga DDS dyan na ex-generals and all, na parang gusto nila ref-gov na. So parang, well then, on one hand, a part of me says, I hope you will be still proud of me after saying this. Like, a part of me is, okay, ganun talaga, we have to be open to different discussion. I'm sure you have different take than me and all. Another part of me is saying, you know, it reminds me of Stuart Hall's term, the missed conjuncture. Like, we have a opening now to take down at least one of the bad guys to set up taking down of the other bad guy later on. But because we're so sabog and everyone doing their own thing, this will be, I'll call it a misconjuncture. I know you'll call it a trillion strategy, but you get what I'm saying. What is your take on this? Are you more with the like resign all na lang? Both Marcos and Duterte's are equally evil. Let's just take them all down. But logistically speaking, how are we going to do that? Kasi like, you cannot go. Kanina sinabi na RJ yan. Sabi parang, pa-ICC yan si Duterte. Marcos, pinakamasama. Uy, Marcos, tulungan mo kami, pa-ICC natin si Duterte. Like, what? How is this gonna happen if we're gonna attack all at the same time? Like, nothing is gonna happen. It's gonna be possible. Or worse, papaksakin lahat. Refco. I don't know, Walden. I'm sure you're not proud of me anymore after saying it. But, medyo sabog siya sa akin. I'm sorry, Walden. My take is sabog siya. But, maybe you have a different take. Your take is we are a bit too much buying the Trillanes strategy. Like, what is your take? Like, sige, go na. Yeah. Let's go.
I would say is that if you're talking about misconjunctures,
Yes.
opportunities, a lot of missed opportunities have happened over the last 30
Absolutely.
years.
We discussed the whole EDSA 1
Yeah, there's
misconjuncture.
EDSA 1,
Yeah.
There was the EDSA 2,
Yeah.
there was the EDSA 3, and so I think what happened, this is just my sense, is that as we went from one misconjuncture to another, the more the progressive forces sort of became more and more fragmented.
Yeah.
And I think the point that we were making last time is that this is not, it's like they say Humpty Dumpty fell on a wall and fell into different pieces. So this is not something that you can just reconstruct in one political campaign right now. No, I think the work has to be put in by the different groups, no?
Right.
To really say, okay, as Ronald said, where have we gone wrong?
Right.
What is our common ground? And I think this is where Professor Nemensa was so important, because despite all these differences among the different groups, the key thing that he was always pushing was, ano bang common ground natin?
Yeah.
Sabi ko na, kasi gumagawa ako ng isang article tungkol sa Bandung, and sabi ko, si Chow and Lai, yung Prime Minister
Premier
China, ni Mao.
May libro nga na tungkol about him.
Yeah.
The most perfect revolutionary.
Yeah, he was
Sabi na,
always
ideologue,
basically saying,
operator,
alam niya what he wanted
Charming
to...
diplomat.
the limits,
Yeah.
as well as the possibilities of a revolution.
Yeah, he knew what he wanted, but always, what is the common ground that we can have at the moment? And then, let's talk about it next time once we've united on that and we've gone over the obstacle. So, I just was reminded, reading about this, about how this was also Dodon's approach. No? And they had the same sense of humor. For instance,
Charm.
And self-criticism.
and self-criticism. Kasi doon sa, there was this point where tinanong si Zhou Enlai ni Henry Kissinger, what do you think of the impact of the French Revolution?
It's too early, yeah.
And sinabi it's too early to tell. And siyempre, everybody said, oh my God,
Is he
this
crazy?
is the long view
Yeah.
of Chinese civilization.
Lingerie,
Pero nagbibiro lang siya.
Yeah.
Partly.
He meant it as a joke and a dig at the West.
Yeah.
Naisip lang yung history niya.
Yeah.
But he said...
Sasabog din kayo, like...
Yeah, but it was, ano ba tawag sa French? Double entendre.
Yeah.
Ngayon, pag ang kasama ni Zhou Enlai, nung sinabi niya yun, si Dodong, makukuha agad ng joke si Dodong.
I think Zhou Enlai was also trying to question, kasi parang ang fear niya was, Kissinger was implying, that should be the direction of history. Is China about to go? So he was saying that, don't it...
Bata-bata, mga 200-300 years old.
Yeah, pa lang kayo.
Kami, 88,000 years old na kami.
So actually, triple entrante.
Triple entrante, tama.
Nag-dig din siya na you guys are barbarians. But speaking of Zhou Enlai, he negotiated the United Front with the Kuomintang against the Japanese. So he was also a great negotiator. So as the operator in the room, Sir Ronald, Aparachik, of course.
Hitler.
Well, whatever.
Sige na, Ronald.
Sige, Sir Ronald, tagapin na natin. Maybe hindi ka political scientist, but definitely you're the best of Aparachik.
Halimbawa, when we joined the Aquino government, alam namin yung limits.
Yeah.
This is not a progressive socialist government.
Yeah.
Ang mahalaga rito ay i-reject nila yung corruption at pre-modernity nung Arroyo administration. Lalo na yung kandidato nung Arroyo administration. No? Meron siyang reforms na gagawin. Na agree kami, bagamat ang tingin namin kulang. Ikalawa ay bibigyan niya kami a seat on the table. Kaya nga naging kandidato si Risa ng isang mainstream party. And eventually she won bago natapos yung gobyerno ni Pinoy. Pero wala kami illusions about
Eyes wide open.
the ideological limits of this government as well as the possibilities na nangyari nga yung RH, na nangyari nga pinakulong nga si Arroyo, etc. etc. So may gano'n naman kaming pagtingin dun sa nangyari dyan. No? At yun nga, yung siguro yung pupunta natin mamaya, the debate over EDCA.
Yes.
No? Paano?
Let's talk about this. So let's go that. No, let's go because I know you need to go and then baka makuha mo naman yung lapel ko. Walden, you had many differences with President Aquino and eventually you resigned from the Aklan party. Of course, there's the Mama Sapano, but in more recent years, I think, let's just say we have been not necessarily aligned on this issue of EDCA, not because we want the Philippines to be dependent on any superpower, but I think there's a sense that that the EDCA is becoming something even worse than what was negotiated back in the day. Like yours was EDCA light, which was still not good enough for a lot of people, of course. But this EDCA looks like another EDCA. Like this is an EDCA, put big American weapons pointing at the pesky Chinese so that they don't mess with us. And the sense of some progressive is, wait, you cannot defend the West Philippine Sea by selling out the country, the whole of the mainland Luzon, or our Ilocos region. That's one take. My take though is like, kind of like Joe and Lai, it's too early to say. You still need to give the Chinese some room to like think twice, because if we have no deterrence whatsoever, unfortunately we still don't have anyone, then we are even more vulnerable. So for me, this is a tactical, not strategic. We all want to be not reliant on any superpower, but for some, China is a greater evil, US not necessarily. And then there's a third school of thought, which is China is maybe the greater evil on the West Philippines issue, but my goodness, Trump 2.0, good luck sa atin dyan, di ba? We don't know what the hell is going to... Some of the appointees there are crazy, they might push us to the cliff. And as we discussed a month ago, there are also isolationists, legitimate isolationists who are taking over top positions saying, abandon the Philippines. One of them argued, the guy who's going to be in charge of Southeast Asia and Pentagon said, let's do a cooperation spiral with China, kung saan we'll withdraw EDCA and everything so that the Chinese will not fight us in South China. In short, just dump the Philippines. So, having said all of those things, Walden, what is your take really on how EDCA is evolving? And at the same time, what is a realistic way of keeping China at bay in the West Philippine Sea? Let me remind everyone that you coined West Philippine Sea basically, or at least your resolution, and I was probably your staffer back then, push for that. This is in the annals of history, including the book of Maritas Vitok on West Philippine Sea. Andun yun. As the man behind the West Philippine Sea idea, or at least a resolution in the Congress, what do you think is a realistic way forward? And what are your worries right now with Trump 2.0, with EDCA, with China, and all of that? Dito, I think makakaroon tayo ng konting debate.
Well, I just wanted, before we left the experience on Aquino,
Sorry. Okay,
during that time, because as Ronald was saying, if we're able to unite on an anti-corruption stand, that was the most important thing, and that was why, as the member of Akbayan in Congress, that's why I supported the alliance. No? And it was.
Alala ko pa nga nung Akbayan Congress when we approved that resolution. Si Walden pa yung defense against another leader ng Akbayan. Alala ko yung exactly.
Hindi na kailangan ng pangalanan ng kaibigan natin.
But it was but at the same time, ang sense ko lang kasi, and I don't want to prolong this debate. I think if you are going to have anti-corruption as your key point, then I think you should have a situation whereby you really use it not only against your enemies, but whenever your friends become corrupt, you also have to
use it as a mirror.
And tell them that you can't get away with this. And that was the difference that I had with the press. I don't want to curse.
No. Not litigate it again.
But that's the principal thing that led to my resignation from as the representative of Bayan in Congress, and of course my ceasing to support the Aquino administration, because I thought it was hypocritical. If you're just going to use it against your enemies but not against your friends. Now, so that was the situation then. And I also felt that if you're in a coalition, you should be able to criticize. This is where we come to EDCA, because
Yeah.
I think I really was very critical of EDCA to the point where the president, in fact, told Ronald that I was more opposition than the opposition. Remember that?
Yeah,
Ronald?
yeah.
Ronald,
Which is not entirely wrong.
yeah. When he came, Ronald told that to me. I said, "Oh my God!" And it was, and I think he
Di ba sabi niya sa'yo, mag-presidente ka na lang?
Oh,
May
yeah.
time napikon siya sa'yo.
Yeah, sabi niya.
Well, Professor, ikaw na lang mag-presidente. Di ba
Yeah,
napikon
yeah,
siya sa
yeah,
kanya?
ganun. So, yun yung,
Yeah.
yung differences namin. Plus, mamasapan. But we need not go into that. Okay.
No,
but-
this US-China. I want to talk about, kasi
Yeah.
kanina Duterte, Marcos, religious groups tayo.
Yeah.
US-China, let's talk about this Cold War.
Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, my stand has always been that we should try to seek an independent foreign policy.
In principle, we all agree on
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
and my sense was that we have to be very careful that we leave that open, and that we are not accused of taking sides in this split between in this conflict between China and the
Intramural,
United States.
yeah,
This is why I opposed EDCA, because I felt that was basically putting our eggs into the pro-US side. This was back in 2014, 2015. And and I said that we're bringing the resolution to the Hague about China's positions there in the West Philippine Sea, and we're undermining our own legal position that we're bringing to the Hague, because we have entered into this military agreement with the United States. The second thing that I pointed out is that, in fact, the United States was not making any commitments to defend us on the West Philippine Sea at that point in time.
Yes, I agree.
And you're making a military agreement with no real,
Yeah.
and the reason you want it is because you want
Deterrence.
deterrence in the West Philippine Sea. And so that was basically what I was saying, is that it's the wrong move because it will compromise the legal position and that it gains you nothing. So the situation is that what I proposed then, and in fact I wrote about this in the New York Times,
Yes. I remember
is,
that, yeah.
is a four-step process of negotiations. Let's deal with the demilitarization issue, and then only at the last step do we then deal with
I
the
missed
territorial
that one.
issue. So 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right.
Kasi this is the way that diplomacy should be
Can you
conducted.
give a snippet of that? Because I remember the other New York Times piece we had all together debating about the
That was
Duterte.
it.
I missed this one. What was the fourth phase again? Sorry, I missed that. Sorry.
Well,
Okay, can we go
the
through the
first
first-
phase
Uh-huh.
was that let's have an agreement whereby the Chinese withdraw from their positions in the West Philippine Sea, and the United States and the Philippines would withdraw from EDCA. So
Mutual
basically,
disengagement issue.
mutual disengagement yung unang-una, and then bring ASEAN in a very strong way to push for the demilitarization of the whole area, no? And then isettle muna natin itong military issues, and then we end up with discussing the territorial issue. Kasi yun ang pinaka-sensitive. Pero unless you have confidence measures
Yeah.
that can bring you to the last point of let's discuss the territorial questions, it will be very difficult to achieve an agreement. Let me just say here that I think history has borne me out, because the U.S. said at during the and in fact, Bongbong even went to, in April of last year, Kishida
The
and
trilateral,
the
yeah,
trilateral
Jaffos,
meeting, that ironclad raw yung defense sa atin. But let me just say that, okay, when has the U.S. ever intervened in the fights or the conflicts between our Coast Guard and the Chinese Coast Guard? None. Zero. It was purely rhetorical. Uh, and, and because the U.S. Is not going to risk a war with China by taking the Philippine side in islands disputes. And we should have seen that from the very start, that mas malaki yung stake ng US than getting involved. And it has never, in all of the conflicts happening now, although the rhetoric of Biden was to say, ironclad, none, zilch, has happened. If you're not getting any kind of real support from your partner, and all your partner really is interested is to make you a bastion for,
Containing
China, why enter into this agreement at this point in time?
So tama si Aquino He's even more oppositional. Parang mas magaling pa yung argument mo kaysa DDS eh.
Well, I agree with Walden. During that moment, during that interregnum,
And then I'll bring in my own
the US
argument.
was not very active.
Thanks, Walden.
Not
That
only
was-
in the region,
I forgot that
but
part.
in relation to the Philippines. They were looking somewhere else. Even yung pivot to Asia ni Obama,
Obama.
Yeah.
wala siyang substance.
Wala.
It was just a slogan, no? Nung nangyari yung
Scarborough show.
yung Scarborough show,
Yeah.
no? Ito, hindi ko kinikwento sa marami. I was sent to China para dahil ang tingin na ni Pinoy, I understand socialism with a Chinese face, with Chinese
Ikaw yung show and line namin.
More than any other cabinet secretary.
Yeah.
No, ang overtly si Trillanes daw yung pumunta. No, pero Tago, pumunta ako doon. Nobody knew
So
about it.
dalawang backdoor pala nangyari.
Nobody knew about that. No?
Double
I
backdoor.
met some Politburo members.
Yeah.
I met Wang Yi. No? Pumunta ako Hong Kong. From Hong Kong, pumunta ako ng Beijing. No? Secretly. What's happening? No? But parang you're preparing to invade us. No? Yun ang sabi nila. Yun ang tanong ko sa kanila. No? Sabi nila, bottom line, hindi kami aalis sa South China Sea, sa Scarborough, sa Ayungin, etc. Bottom line, yan ang sinabi nila. No? Dahil amin yan. Sabi ko, layo sa China eh. Layo sa China. Sabi nila, hindi, amin yan. Ayun yung kanila. So, very close kasi ako sa Chinese ambassador, Ambassador Zhao.
Zhao pala, yeah.
Ambassador Zhao, no?
Na makulit, dialectical mag-isip. And actually, ano siya?
Medyo may rigor.
Manchu siya, di ba?
Ideological
Yeah.
at saka kwan. Galing siya sa Manchu.
Hindi
Minority.
siya-
Yung
hindi siya
grandfather niya was a Manchu general.
Exactly, yeah.
Yung tatay niya pinakulong during the Cultural Revolution. No?
And nag-aaral sa Washington, D.C., yeah.
Yes, magaling siya mag-English, then nag-aaral siya
Yeah.
sa
George
US,
Washington
no?
University,
etc., etc. So, naging close kami. So, we can agree to disagree.
Yes.
No? After nun, pumunta ako sa Vietnam para tanungin yung Vietnamese government yung karanasan nila with engagement with China. Na-met ko yung kanilang defense chief, yung intelligence chief, at saka yung deputy foreign minister. No? Sabi nila, patuloy yung aming party-to-party dialogue, patuloy yung aming military-to-military dialogue. Pero sabi nila, bottom line, dapat meron kayong minimum capacity to defend
Deterrence,
yourself.
yeah.
Or else, China will walk all over
Yeah,
you.
they will
They
just
don't
slap you around.
understand diplomacy. No? They don't understand diplomacy. Wala sa kanilang socialism with Chinese character siya. No? Ang alam nila, 100 years of humiliation. And they deserve to be the new superpower.
So in short, they also have hegemonic ambitions of their own. Just spell it out, yeah.
Yung tinatawag ni Deng Xiaoping na social imperialism. No? Nung pumalit si Xi Jinping noong 2012, when I was there in China, it was a transition from Hu Jintao and Deng Xiaoping. Sinusundan ako ng dalawang grupo. Tinanong ko doon sa kakilala ko, sino yung mga sumusunod sa akin? Sabi niya, Yung iba mga intelligence agents ni Hu Jintao, yung isa ay intelligence agents ni Xi Jinping na transition yung moment na yon, no? Pero may mga criticism sila sa isa't isa, no? Yung Hu Jintao at saka Xi Jinping. So yun lang yung context noon, no? Yung panahon na yun. At pinaliwanag ko nga sa kanila, this is the only Philippine president na ang una niyang state visit was China, not the US. No? Nakakita na ba kayo ng Philippine president na ang unang state visit is with China? Ikalawa, nag-defer kami sa inyo during the Nobel Peace Prize awardee doon sa artists. No? Hindi kami dumalo. Ikatlo ay yung mga nahuli namin na mga triads, Taiwanese. Upon your request, pinadala namin sa mainland, not sa Taiwan. Galit na galit yung Taiwanese government. No? Ang humingi nun was the Chinese government. Doon namin pinadala. Ito, habang sa kanila, nakita nyo na sa inyo nagde-defer. And for 8 months, hindi kinakausap ni Pinoy yung si Ambassador Thomas. No? Dahil 8 months, dahil nagalit siya. No? Kinakailangan pa namin mag-organize ng isang jazz activity. Dahil jazz, paborito ni Pinoy yung jazz. Yung asawa ni Ambassador Thomas was a jazz singer. Para ma-break yung ice. Pero 8 months, hindi niya kinakausap. Dahil galit siya sa US noon, nung panahon na yan. That was 2011. No? Kaya, from the start, hindi siya anti-China. Hindi rin siya necessarily pro-US. Galit na galit siya doon sa binigay sa aming barko ng US.
Na walang kwenta-kwenta na rotten.
50 caliber,
Vietnam era,
50 caliber, hindi pumuputok. So, hindi pumuputok. Kaya tama si Walden na hindi masyadong concern ng US, yung Pilipinas, at that time. Pero, inuulit ko lang, I went to China to negotiate. No? Ang sabi ng China, no. Bottom line, amin ito. Mahaba pa yan, diplomatic, back and forth, no? 2014, nag-meeting kami, mukhang hindi na uubra ito. Ayaw na talaga nila umalis. At, ang game changer, they were already building their bases inside our territory, yung artificial islands. No? Tinatayo na nila.
Exclusive ground zone.
Nagrarally pa sila Walden noon, sa Chinese Embassy, remember, di ba? Kasama mo si Goles, etc. No? 2014, anong gagawin natin? Kailangan natin sabihin sa ating tao that we can defend ourselves at the very least diplomatically, if not militarily. Doon nagkaroon ng decision sa UNCLOS. No? Na hindi membro ang US. Galit ang US sa UNCLOS dahil natalo sila sa UNCLOS dun sa kaso nila with Nicaragua. At ang kinuha naming lawyers are the same lawyers na tumalo sa US, no? At that time. Pero mahabang diskusyon yun, The US had nothing to do with the UNCLOS case. I'm 100% sure.
I know you need to go kasi this is...
Nililinaw ko lang.
No, exactly. Ang point ko kasi dito, Walden.
At nung pumasok sa EDCA, at that time, no, it was about, yung EDCA was part of the Visiting Forces Agreement na naaprubahan ni ERAP. Hindi yan galing sa panahon ni Pinoy. Without defending Pinoy, doon yan sa panahon. Kaya nga, medyo shell yung EDCA ng panahon ni Pinoy. Wala dong mga arms, wala dong rockets, no, wala dong, it's just
wala rin commitment si Obama because he didn't want to pick a fight.
Although, binabanatan namin yan, kami as akbayan, dahil ang mas gusto namin, yung Australian Visiting Forces Agreement. Na kung magkakaroon ng krimen, yung US troops, it will fall under our jurisdiction. Yun yung debate nun, no? Pero sinasabi ko lang, iba ito dun sa EDCA ngayon. No?
I want to go to the economic, kasi ganito, Walden, my fundamental problem is this. In theory, I would love us to be more like Vietnam, but Vietnam has 6 kilo-class submarines na advanced Russian better-than ones. They have advanced MiG fighters. They have 600,000 strong mobilized forces and half a century at least of combat. So,
and 3 wars with China.
Exactly. So my point, and 1,000 years of struggle. So for me, the Vietnam parallel just doesn't work with the Philippines because we don't have the basic even capacity whatsoever, and we don't have the strategic culture of self-reliance and the sophistication of Vietnamese. So if there's no US backing whatsoever, China will just slap you around. Second, ASEAN. I was just in an ASEAN conference last month. Not a single even beep about West Philippine Sea. In fact, if anything, si Anwar Ibrahim, our good friend, the Philippines, he said, I don't want to be like the Philippines. Troublemakers. We want to be good with China. Like, they're throwing us under the bus openly, Walden. So, I'm immediately having 2 problems here. First, 2 steps na pa lang. Parang, I don't think the Chinese will respect you if you have no deterrence whatsoever. Even the Vietnamese, they're being slapped around sometimes. Forget about. And second, ASEAN is, I'm sorry, they're worse than useless. They even enabled China. And then on your point about US not committing, and this could be a double-edged sword, in 2019, for the first time, Pompeo came here and said, any attack on your troops, vessels, will trigger. And Wallen, ito ba, last year, openly US said we are willing to join you in patrols to the Ayungin Shoal because meron tayong mutual defense. Pag binaril yung mga troops mo dyan, activated yan. So, facts have changed Walden. And for me, in principle, I agree with, in fact, Mahathir, I interviewed him in 2019, he said almost exactly the same thing as you, demilitarization, ganun. But for me, all of that presumes that China will agree to any kind of withdrawal, and I just don't see them doing that, given their logic of imperial strategy. US is an imperialistic power, they have done horrible things, I've spent time in the Middle East, I know horrible things, but from the stories of my grandfather's Soviet occupation in the region in Caspian, I know there's also Eastern imperialism. And what I see with China today is also imperialism, in my opinion. So that's my concern right now, that we're too much focusing on the U.S. imperialism, but we're not paying attention to the Chinese imperialism.
Let me just.
Sorry, I just had to get that out.
Sure. Let me just raise a couple of points here. One is that I've been very clear from the very beginning, in all of my writings,
Right.
that the Chinese method of resolving the conflicts in the West Philippine Sea is fundamentally wrong.
Wrong, yeah.
That basically you do not just unilaterally assert your sovereignty, especially since it violates the United Nations
Convention
on the Law of the Seas. No? I think that's the first thing, and which is why I sponsored that amendment or that resolution changing the name of the
West
South China
Philippine Sea.
West Philippine Sea as one of the diplomatic ways, but asserted, to tell the Chinese that, hey, you're being quite nasty over here. The second thing is I also understand that the reasons for China's moves in the South China Sea, West Philippine Sea has been a defensive strategy against
American
United States.
circle.
Because the one thing is that the South China Sea is practically an American lake. Okay, the Seventh Fleet.
The Pacific is an American
Sure,
fleet.
but the Seventh Fleet is there 10 months out of every year. And basically, what you have are warships that can go up to 12 miles off the coast of China. Okay, and
Which China doesn't agree with, and
Yeah.
they push back against it.
And you've got to realize that the Shanghai, Guangdong, that whole area is where the industrial infrastructure of China lies, no?
Their economic engine,
Yeah, that's it. If they get wiped out in 30-second or 1 minute or 2-minute attack by cruise missiles from the United States, that can be fired from the different bases of the United States. It has hundreds of military installations. No? That cripples China. No? So I'm just trying to say that.
Yeah, sure. From the Chinese point of view, it's a defensive.
Therefore, they're not even focused on the resources. It's how do you construct emplacements within maritime formations where you can install land-to-air missiles that will allow you 30 seconds to 1 minute,
breathing space,
cushion. Before you get there. And if you look at what the Chinese have been putting up, whether it's the islands that they have or maritime formations, or
the Daifeng missile, anti-cruise
or
missiles.
the mischief reef and that sort of thing. These are all anti-missile defenses, no?
To hit the Americans coming in.
And in a nuclear exchange, seconds matter. Yeah. So I'm just trying to say that we also have to understand
Sure.
where they are coming from.
Of course.
Okay.
Ang sinasabi ko
Grand
lang, Walter,
strategy yan.
ang sinasabi ko lang, Walter, ay una,
Yeah.
hindi kita kailangan ng US na EDCA for that military purpose. Nandun sila sa Japan, no? Nandun
Sa
sila
Guam.
sa Korea,
Yeah.
And
sa
Guam.
Guam sila,
Yeah.
with modern missiles,
Yeah.
especially dun sa kanilang mga satellites, hindi nila tayo kailangan. No?
Yeah.
Kalawa ay...
Singapore too, they have Changi Port
Kalawa
access,
ay,
yeah.
nauna yung China, bumili, magtayo ng mga floating aircraft carriers, no, ng mga islands, no. Ako itutulak ko dun sa mga Typhoon missiles ngayon dito. Pero ang sinasabi ko lang, that came much later.
Sure.
No? It wasn't nauna. Kaya ang sinasabi ko, yung Asia pivot ni Obama has no substance, no? Has no substance.
We all agree,
Kaya,
yeah.
yun yung kwan. Walang kwan binigay sa ating World War II vessels na hindi
Yeah.
man lang pumuputok yung baril. Kaya
Yeah.
galit na galit si Pinoy noong
I
panahon na yun. Kaya pumunta kami sa UNCLOS no, at that time. It has
Yeah,
nothing to
yeah.
do with the Americans. Yun, sigurado ko yun. Kami nagdedebate noon at that time. At ang kinuha namin na mga abogado, yung tumalo sa US, abogado ng Nicaragua, doon sa kanilang dispute with the US sa UNCLOS, na inuulit ko, hindi miyembro ang US. At ang ginamit namin to win are basically old Chinese maps to show na even in the Chinese dynasties, they never included yung West
Entire
Philippine
South China
Sea.
Sea.
Kaya maganda yung ginawang resolution ni Walden. Yung describe yung ating EEZ as the West Philippine Sea because at that time, wala tayong mga maritime description ng ating territory. Nauna yun, ha?
At hindi
Nauna yun.
updated yung baseline
Pero
law natin.
sa talks ko sa kanila,
Right.
malinaw sa kanila, ubus na yung kanilang aquatic mass sa Chinese coast. Malinaw
Sa
sa,
Fujian
kanila,
and-
malinaw sa kanila, our territory has the most number of natural gas and oil.
Untapped.
No,
Yeah.
inamin nila just one area 2 years
Rectobank,
ago.
Reed
Inamin
Bank,
nila that there are 100 billion tons no ng oil in that small part of the West Philippine Sea.
Reed Bank
Ibig sabihin,
area. Yeah.
ayoko lang i-underestimate yung desire nila
Sure.
na kunin yung ating West Philippine Sea, yung natural resources dyan. Aside dun sa gusto nilang wasakin yung containment strategy ng China. Sinasabi ko lang, yung containment strategy ng China, ng US, can be done without the Philippines. Siyempre nakatulong. Tulong dito tayo. But they've been doing that for decades with Taiwan, with Japan, and with
Korea.
Kaya nga, ang dalawang issues namin was the West Philippine Sea, na pinanggalingan ng resolution ni Walden at saka ng Akbayan. Tapos yung freedom of navigation sa high seas. Because 30% of global trade dun dumadaan. No? Yun yung concern namin. Taiwan, wala kaming masyadong issue dyan. It's a one China
Yeah,
policy.
but the
na.
Taiwan one matters.
Nililinaw ko lang yung context na.
But the Taiwan one matters because Walden, one big issue with EDCA bases are mostly to the north. Taiwan is there. So are we okay if they invade Taiwan and take over Taiwan? They'll be our immediate neighbor. Are we okay?
No.
Like, what do you want to happen if Taiwan is invaded?
First of all, just a number of points. No? I agree with some of the points that Ronald raised. Especially the importance of the diplomatic legal offensive that we had in The Hague. No?
Right.
And that's why I thought that was extremely important. Not to undermine that by entering into a military agreement with the
Geopolitical
United
game, yeah.
States. No? Kasi, if once you enter that, you've really lost the moral high ground that you're basically saying, that's what we're after. And I could even predict what the Chinese were going to do. They're going to say they don't want this sort of thing, this whole Hague thing is fake and everything, because we had already entered into a military agreement with the United States.
But you're assuming that China would have respected it if we had not entered EDCA.
Well,
I doubt that.
Yeah.
That's my problem. I doubt the Chinese
Okay.
would respect it either way.
No,
Damn if you do, damn if you don't.
basically, what I'm saying is that we really have to be very careful about our moves. And if there are times when asserting moral authority is the most important thing, instead of undermining that with a military agreement, that is what I would prefer. Okay? Especially if your partner has no intention anyway of defending you.
At that time.
Yeah, right. And I mean, as I said, laway lang naman yung kila Pompeo, and the thing is that have we ever seen the United States come to the aid of our Coast Guard vessels? None. Why? Because they think the Philippines is just small fry. No?
Pero
I mean,
Walden, that's a contradiction in terms. Gusto mo ba na sila ay depensahan yung ating
exactly.
Navy,
We
ating
don't
Coast
want
Guard?
them.
Di ba ayaw mo rin yun, no?
no. Of course,
Your argument is that U.S. is unreliable, but the
Yeah.
Americans spend
Yeah.
100 billion on Ukraine, hundreds of billions on Israel and
Yeah,
this
yeah.
country when they fight. So why shouldn't they fight for a treaty ally to? Because if the Ukraine logic is to
No,
bog down Russia, they would love to bog down
no.
China over the Philippines.
No, my point
I'm
is
just looking at their
that
logic here,
I'm opposed to any sort of U.S. intervention. All I'm trying to say is that if our intention of entering EDCA 1 and EDCA 2 was to assure U.S. support for us in very concrete ways, then we were conned, we were fooled, because they had never any intention of doing that. So my point is that in a situation like that, where your treaty ally is unreliable, and basically that that you cannot rely on the military equation, then I think you really have to push for gaining the high ground in terms of your moral authority.
But would it
And
work
your
with China?
Well, my point is that this is a long-term kind of thing.
Pero
But
Walden,
we're losing every day.
Pero Walden, at the same time, nandun yung ating frontliners, nandun yung ating mga mangingisda.
Every
na
year,
tinataboy,
$600
diba?
million.
We have to show something
yeah,
na meron tayong
We cannot
capacity.
wait another 30
Okay,
years.
we have to show that the capacity to defend themselves. Actually, the first
That's
EDCA,
why-
the first EDCA was, I agree, was just a shell.
Yeah.
Dahil it's more symbolic than
Yeah.
substantial.
Yeah.
The present EDCA is more substantial kumpara nung sa
Yeah,
EDCA 1. No?
right.
Yun,
Yeah.
it was just part of the BFA
Yeah.
na parang dun lang mapupunta yung mga troops na papapasok dito. No? Kami nga, ang posisyon namin, very critical dun sa EDCA 1. Ang sinasabi lang, the objective then was to show a minimum capacity sa ating mga tao
Minimum deterrence
that we
capacity.
can defend them. Lalo
But
na
Walden is
tinatawag
saying
sila.
the Americans are unreliable. So in short, you're fool to go into a contract where it's open-ended on their side, but we are bogged down in that.
Exactly.
So,
Sabi ko nga, that was just symbolic. It was not yung Typhoon missiles ngayon, the biggest military exercises ngayon. That never happened noong panahon namin.
Yeah.
Hindi yan nangyari.
so what about the idea that we
Mas ang highlight nga noong panahon namin was the West Philippine
but-
Sea name. No?
But Ronald, the point is Walden is saying is that even the symbolic vacuous EDCA just gave China more excuse to double down. So in short, self-defeating pa rin yun.
Lalo na kung wala yun. Ayun ang sinasabi namin, dahil diplomatically, we did almost everything eh. No, we did almost everything. Bending backwards, no? Sabi ko nga, I went twice. I was the only Filipino to speak at the Communist Party school sa Beijing. I was the only Filipino to speak at the Party Congress of the Communist Party. No? I was the only Filipino to attend their party congress. So
So what you're saying from your own
Yeah,
direct
we-
interaction with
Yes,
relevant people,
yes.
you just didn't see it working if
Sabi,
those two have no
malinaw sa
deterrence.
kanila, this is ours, no? After lagi na sinasabi, 100 years of humiliation. This is now our time, no?
Moment in the sun.
Wala kami pakialam. At nung UNCLOS, kasama natin lahat ng claimant states. They two of them even promised to file the same case sa UNCLOS, Vietnam and Indonesia. Afterwards, nung nanalo na tayo, sinisingil ko sila.
Yeah.
Sabi niyo magpa-file
Yeah.
kayo ng case.
Yeah.
Sabi nila sa akin, hindi, okay na, nanalo na kayo eh.
You
So
take
your victory
Yeah.
is also our victory.
Yeah.
No? Ganun yung sabi sa akin ng dalawang bansa na sumama sa UNCLOS, ha? Oo. Kaya,
No, but my point is like Walden, my challenge to you, and I want you
Yeah.
to respond to that. My challenge, Walden, to you is I do agree that sometimes, more than sometimes, we're not negotiating well. They have us on the cheap, if I can put it that way, right? I get it. Ang point ko lang dito is that, but we have to also agree, whatever is
Yes.
the China is having its own hegemonic imperialistic moment. So how do you realistically respond to that moment? Or you're disagreeing that China is having its own imperialistic hegemonic moment?
As I said, I'm fairly critical of China in the way that it's behaving in the West Philippine Sea.
sila Walden nga yung
But-
naglagay ng mahabang,
Yeah.
alam mo yun, measuring stick
Yeah.
to measure the line, that line.
Let Walden
But-
respond. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess my point here is that the measures we are taking, which is to continue to supply our forces over there, plus what a number of forces, including Akbayan, did in terms of civil society
Right.
intervention in the area to go to our bases, the bases in those islands
Peaceful.
peacefully. I think, I fully support that.
Right.
But that's a very different thing. Those are things that, we can push, for negotiations, etc., etc. But that's a very different situation from relying on the Americans that have no intention of defending you, but actually just want to make you a springboard for their containment.
But can't we have a convergence of interest that they want containment, we want deterrence, and we can meet somewhere in the middle? Isn't that mutually? Is that mutually exclusive? I mean,
Well,
like Ukraine, right? Ukraine wants to beat Russia. The Americans want to bog down the Russians, so they have a convergence of interest, and they give $100 billion to Ukraine. I mean, that's how geopolitics works, right? Well, then the real
but
politics.
the problem is we gave the whole store to the Americans
On the cheap, not
on the cheap without any return for it.
You would be okay if taking mas a lot of
No, I'm not saying that. No,
Makulit ka, Ronald.
I'm
It's
not,
like, I know.
I'm not saying that. All I'm
I'm
trying
just
to
pushing
say
it this
is that
logical conclusion.
what I'm just saying is that I don't agree with that kind of move. But those who made it thought that way,
And
and
they
they
were
were
foolish.
fooled by this
I get it.
this process. On the Taiwan question
Hmm.
that you raised, China's position has always been cross-strait economic integration leading to
Eventual.
unification. no?
Except Hong Kong happened, and like, good luck with like.
But
I
the thing
think
is that
Walden, that has changed.
Like Walden, things are not the same.
Well,
I mean,
no,
like
I mean,
the
The survival of Xi
consensus.
Jinping is now tied to the
2027
Vision
plan.
of Taiwan.
Yeah.
But I don't think that China would be foolish enough.
He has a different read there.
To
So,
invite
Ron, we just have we have
Taiwan.
different reads on this. Yeah, okay.
But
Let's agree,
the one
disagree on
that kept
that,
on
yeah.
pushing that Taiwan was going to be invaded was really the
Americans.
American defense establishment.
The
When
US
there
Air Force
was no
Commander.
basis
Yeah.
for me, looking at it in all the different strategic views of China, that they would like to provoke American intervention by invading Taiwan. Okay? It was always cross-strait economic integration.
To be fair,
Yeah.
Actually,
Xi
we
Jinping
say-
said we should be in a position to invade,
Actually,
not invade in
Actually, they already
2027.
have that, the economic integration. That's why the Taiwan is divided between the older generation and the
DPP
younger.
at
Because
saka
the older,
Kuomintang also,
I
yeah.
think that is already happening or has already happened. No? That's why you have more than 3 decades of strategic ambiguity, the Kissinger formula, di ba? Neither defending nor etc.
Yeah.
Pero at this time, the survival of Xi Jinping,
Yeah.
his relationship with the People's Liberation Army is tied to Taiwan.
Yun yung different read kasi
Yun yung,
natin, Walden. Yeah,
his
I think
survival-
our read is
yeah.
China is
But
much more
I have to
aggressive.
leave you.
Yes, thank
I'm
you.
late for
Thank
my show.
Thank you
Okay.
so much.
You
Thank you
can
so No,
continue
this is
yeah?
great. I know
Yeah.
you're getting late. Just one last sentence, Ronald, before you leave, and make sure you don't get my laptop. What is your initial sense of Trump 2.0? Is this a warring administration or things are still open?
I think
Possibilities?
all things constant. No, his appointments, his advisors. No, nothing much will change.
Continuity.
But then again, you have a very
Predictable.
unpredictable transactional president
Right.
who gave TikTok 75 days extension, even if a bipartisan body na Republican
And the Supreme Court
pinaalis na sila. No? So, you have a very unpredictable. Sabi niya, I will defend Taiwan, but they will have to pay.
Pay for it.
In a way,
Yeah.
parang sa NATO.
You can leave.
yeah,
I'll ask
yeah,
Walden
yeah,
last.
yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you so much, Sir Ronald Llamas. That was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Just
Okay.
last point, I want to get also Walden on this because I felt Walden didn't
Okay.
needs a bit more time. Walden, last I want to go back to the Trump thing. Thank you so much, Sir Ronald. May utang kami sa'yo. Yeah. Walden, I really appreciate this because it looks like we have slightly different read of China, and that explains our divergence in terms of tactical responses. But I think we all agree we shouldn't be dependent on any of the superpowers. And in fairness to you, since last time we talked about this issue, last December, ngayon kasi may appointments na eh. A couple of key appointments we're seeing in the Pentagon, in the State Department. These are people that are called so-called restrainers, isolationists, let's call them Jacksonians. Their idea essentially is US should be for US itself. We'll use force only when it serves us. Forget about allies. It's all about America first. Do you think that with Trump we'll see a radical departure from that kind of more bipartisan anti-China consensus that has been building up throughout the years in the US, or let's just call it the Cold Warrior mindset? You know US better than all of us here in terms of the Cold War era, from Kissinger essentially to the new Kissinger guys, Kissingerians now. What is your read of Trump? Do you think his new appointments and all is confirming your initial? Because parang yung sense mo last year was Trump is going to be so transactionalist, and he might like just go and strike a deal with the Chinese, grand bargain. So we'll be even more foolish if we're involved, if you're invested in it. What's your read? Yeah.
My sense here is that Trump is playing to his isolationist base.
Right.
And that's a very strong base who basically would like the U.S. to focus inward,
Yeah.
reindustrialize the U.S., basically put the focus on raising tariff walls, keeping immigrants out, and basically the whole idea of the isolationist, which I think Trump is instinctively, is to focus on the United States and the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah.
Monroe
Monroe Doctrine, essentially,
Yeah.
for the 21st century. Yeah.
And the second thing is that if you remember,
Right.
during the first Trump administration, he did a number of things that basically separated it from the expansive imperialism of the Democrats and the Republicans.
The Bolton type,
Yeah,
Pompeo type.
right. And among them was he basically tore up the Trans-Pacific Partnership that every Republican and Democrat wanted. And then he went to, just to mention this,
Yeah.
he went and met Kim Jong-un in Korea, stepped over
Yeah.
to pat him on the back, and basically began a personal relationship that makes the South Koreans and the Japanese very worried about what that might mean. Because will he strike a deal of lowering the U.S. military presence in South Korea and Japan in return for some sort of deal with Kim Jong-un? So I guess, and then, you know, at one point, Trump said he would not waste one American life for those rocks, which he meant the rocks in the South China Sea. So I think we have a non-internationalist president
Yeah.
of the U.S. at this point, where
Who doesn't believe in commitments?
yeah, he doesn't believe in
yeah.
commitments. He
Yeah.
doesn't think that you have to defend what they
Certain
call
order, yeah.
the defend freedom everywhere,
Rules-based international order.
etc., etc. But is more interested in some kind of retrenchment that would allow the focus to the U.S. to rebuild. Now, but as Ronald said, he's very unpredictable. His instincts may be isolationist, but he's also quite unpredictable. So
He has ego also.
basically, I think what we're going to see is the U.S. will begin to have a kind of spheres of influence kind of
Approach, yeah.
and that its main sphere of influence is the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah.
And I think that with respect to the Middle East, I think it's just going to let the Israelis do what they want. Okay, Africa will be completely marginalized. South Asia, I'm not exactly sure, although he's close ideologically to Modi.
And Europe, a lot of tensions.
And
I
Europe
suppose.
will just be left to fend for itself.
Yeah.
And my sense is going to reach a deal with Putin. And so what does that mean for the Asia Pacific? I think this is, I don't think the Americans, especially the isolationists like Trump and his people, would really want to put much investment to the military containment of China. I think if he can reach a deal with Xi Jinping on Taiwan, on the West Philippines Sea,
Yeah.
etc., etc., that's what we should be looking at this point in time. But this open-ended commitment, the ironclad thing that Biden said, but doesn't. I don't think that Trump would make a statement or make a commitment like that. So we're in a very tumultuous period where we can no longer assume that U.S. foreign policy will be what it was under Biden.
Or even
under
Trump
Bush.
1.0. Even
Yeah,
Trump
Trump
1.0.
1.0.
Yeah.
So for me, I think I would look at this as an opportunity for the Philippines to really chart out an independent foreign policy.
And does it mean kind of like a multi-alignment of working more with Indians and the Turks and
Yes.
Koreans and
Yeah.
different countries,
Yeah.
but no really involvement in some sort of containment.
Yeah.
But aren't we slightly already doing that? We're working more with Indians. I was just with in India the other
Yeah, but
month. They're
we
sending
really-
us weapon systems. We're working
Sure,
with
but we really don't have
strategic culture of yourself.
we really don't have a coherent foreign policy aside from what the Marcos administration has done, which is to outsource our foreign policy, our defense policy to the United States. That's what they did under Biden.
Isn't that what the Philippines has been doing since Second World War?
Yeah, but there were efforts in some of this administration. Even the first Marcos said the father.
The father,
to try
even
to,
Ramos,
to try to sort of carve out
Yeah.
a space, but then all that got lost under Marcos Jr. Where everything is now outsourced, and I don't think even the DFA or our national defense is going to disagree with me that much of it has been outsourced to Washington. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that, of course, there are many challenges in the coming period, but I think we should also look at this as a chance to really formulate a really independent foreign policy. We work with diplomacy, we work with what we have, and we disengage from useless defense agreements like EDCA, to see, in fact, that we're entering a period where the big superpower, the United States, is now looking inward, and we are the least of its concerns. So my sense is there are dangers, but there are also opportunities in this coming period, and to work with our neighbors at this point in time, because they're also in a fluid, kind of situation. So
They're also in a bind, yeah.
yeah.
They're
So
also-
my sense is this is the era that we're entering at this point, and the important thing is let's take back the creation and the making of our foreign defense policy into our hands and away from Washington, and then everything. Then we can really say that we are making moves that would be, we have to have a grand strategy.
Yes.
Except our grand strategy in the past has always been the United States. And then we have a president who has no concept of strategy at all, except to outsource everything to Washington. So this is, if your head of state really doesn't really know anything about where he's headed in terms of foreign policy because he doesn't have a strategy, then we're really in a very dangerous situation.
Oh, thank you for that intervention. Well, I mean, for me, in principle, if we are going to move towards a more independent foreign policy, it's important you manage the transition.
Yeah.
Because as you decouple from Americans, in theory, there's going to be that
Yeah.
phase of vulnerability because you're going to be kind of on your own. So it's very important you kind of forward deploy the diversification.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, when it comes to the Trump administration, I think there are going to be a lot of internal debates, including among isolationists, because some of them are prioritizers, like Elbridge Colby, who want to just focus on China, forget about Europe, and then there are like really isolationist restrainers, or say buyers among us, Demino, no, I think U.S. has to just focus on its own national interest and maybe a Monroe Doctrine for the 21st century. So a lot to discuss. So thank you so much, Walden, for that
Okay.
fantastic discussion.
Well, this
Our
is-
real tenured professor expert in the room. Like I had to go back
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Walden.
The
Yeah.
one thing I would say
Please.
is that we do have to be firm with China
Yes.
with respect to how we could be firm relying on our own resources.
Right.
And if we have to do it mainly on the legal and diplomatic front,
Yeah.
let's do that. And this is the message that I was trying to say back then when I authored that resolution naming the West Philippine Sea.
2011.
You know,
Rename it to West
renaming
Philippine, our
it to-
ex-West Philippine.
Yeah, you know, the South China Sea, the West Philippine Sea. Moves like that are very important when you're dealing with China. And China is a complex country.
Not monolithic.
It's
I get it.
Not monolithic. I think the way that it has basically behaved towards most of the global South has been positive. It has become the biggest development aid giver to so many countries.
Well, he's not
in
claiming their
Africa.
territory. He doesn't share a border with them. That's their problem,
No,
right?
okay, yeah. I mean, you know, when it comes to
Tyranny from distance from tyranny.
yeah. But when it comes to borders, I think that's where the problem lies, because for the Chinese, a lot of these are colonial borders. And as
Vietnam's borders. I mean, like Gulf of Tonkin.
No, but China and Vietnam reached agreements.
That's
on
what
their
the
borders.
Chinese say. The Vietnamese will tell you different.
Okay, but the point is, you know, that we cannot just say that it is a hegemonic imperialist.
It's just a monolithic evil. We cannot
Yeah,
say that. But
right.
people always say you cannot also say the same thing with the U.S. because the U.S. also played a stabilizing role, not here or there, but maybe in Europe or some other regions of the world.
Well, I'm not quite sure about that.
Okay, so I think that's the difference,
Yeah,
whereby you feel even if China has its hegemonic moment, it still has its benign and constructive and openness to change,
Yeah.
while the U.S. is already, we know it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
200 years
Yeah.
of interventions around the world.
And
Okay.
we have to make sure that when things like the West Philippine Sea come, we are clear with China as to what our interests are. And let's not hide that, even if we can just assert that diplomatically and not be able to assert it in real terms. No? But my point is that we have to have a foreign policy that really is realistic, but at the same time principled. And I think we now have an opportunity with a possible U.S.
Disengagement,
pullback
retrenchment.
from East Asia to be able to enter an era where we can have a very creative foreign policy in terms of alliances, the relationship with China, the relationship with Japan, that sort of thing. That is the kind of thing that is opening up at this point in time.
Thank you, Professor
Okay.
Walden Bellew, for the fantastic discussion. Tuloy natin yan. I'm sure there's going to be a lot to discuss. I was thinking it's going to be sabog with Trump. It's going to be sabog with everyone.
Yeah.
Like kind of politics.
Yeah.
So lots to discuss. Thank you. So guys, that was volume 2 of Marcos and Marxism. Just to give you an idea of what are the kind of discussions we're interested in, and we're extremely thankful to Walden and Secretary Llamas also for lending their time. So stay tuned. Baka magka-volume 3 pa tayo, baka Zoom na kasi medyo mapagod na yata si Walden hosting us. But we'll try to continue this conversation. And to some of our other friends from the Progressive who said, bakit hindi kaming iniimbita? Bakit silang dalawa lang? Don't worry, we're gonna arrange something also separate with you. This is just the beginning of a series of, let's say, progressive take on international and domestic affairs that I feel we uniquely do on this podcast. No offense to mga sa kabilang channels. So, na naman tayo. Thank you so much. God bless and talk to you soon.
Okay.
Fantastic. Salamat, Walden. Let me just turn off this live. Baka may masabi na.